The Veth had a word for it. Colossal. Loosely translated, the final breaking. The moment when any living thing, no matter how stubborn, stopped. Accepted. Surrendered to the mathematics of pain and exhaustion. Every species the Veth had ever encountered possessed this threshold. They had catalogued it carefully. The Droon broke at 72 hours of sustained combat. The Oral Collective fractured after 3 decisive defeats. The Marathai, proud and ancient, lasted 6 weeks before their council sued for peace. It was science, not cruelty. The Veth simply applied pressure until the colossal arrived. Then they stopped. Then they negotiated terms. Fleet Commander Sovreth had been applying that pressure to the Terrans for 4 months. It had begun cleanly enough. The Veth assault had destroyed Earth's orbital defense network in the first 11 hours. 3 major surface installations followed in the first week. The Terran space fleet, smaller than anticipated, but well organized, had met them at the belt and fought hard for 9 days before being pushed back toward the inner system. Sovreth had been impressed, initially. The Terrans maneuvered well. Their individual pilots showed unusual initiative. Their damage control teams kept ships operational long past what his technical advisors said was structurally possible. But they were outnumbered 4 to 1. The math was not in their favor. By the end of the second month, his analysts presented a briefing that satisfied him. Terran fleet strength was down to 31%. Their forward command station had been destroyed. 2 of their 3 major shipyards were gone. Supply lines were stretched and failing. Several of their colony settlements had gone dark. Colossal approach, the briefing concluded. Estimated complete collapse, 30 to 40 days. Sovreth had filed it and continued the pressure. The collapse did not come in 30 days. Or 40. By the end of the 3rd month, his analysts revised their estimate. They used careful language, unforeseen adaptive capacity, non-standard resilience coefficients, but Sovreth had been a fleet commander for 30 years and he recognized, beneath the careful language, something simpler. They were confused. The Terrans were operating at 19% fleet capacity. They had no functioning shipyards. Their ground forces on 3 colonies were cut off, supplied only by a network of small vessels that ran dark and fast through lanes his patrols could never quite fully seal. They had lost more ships in the previous 8 weeks than most species possessed in total. And they were still fighting. Not desperately. Not chaotically. Methodically. Efficiently. As though they had simply recalibrated around the losses and continued. Sovreth called his senior tactical officer, a veteran named Harith, into his command cabin. "Explain this to me," he said, and placed the latest engagement report on the table between them. Harith studied it for a long moment. He was not young, Harith. He had served in 9 campaigns. He was not given to alarm. "They keep repairing things," Harith said finally. "Ships we assess as total losses, they bring them back. Installations we destroy, they rebuild them underground, or inside asteroids, or in locations we haven't mapped. Every time we eliminate a command structure, a new one forms within 72 hours. We destroyed their primary logistics hub at Callisto. Within 2 weeks they had 3 smaller ones operating that collectively exceeded its throughput." "How?" Harith was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, Commander. I've reviewed the intercepts. They don't appear to have a plan so much as a reflex. Individual units making local decisions that collectively sustain the whole. We eliminate a part and another part grows to compensate." Sovreth stared at the report. "What is their morale assessment?" "That's the other thing," Harith said. "We intercepted a communication between 2 of their ground units last week. Sector 7 forces, they've been isolated for 6 weeks, low on supplies, operating in damaged equipment. The communication was between their commanding officer and one of her subordinates." He paused. The subordinate asked how long they were expected to hold. And? The commanding officer said, until we don't have to anymore. Harith folded his hands. That was the entirety of the answer. The subordinate acknowledged and the communication ended. Sovrith said nothing for a long time. The 4th month brought something Sovrith had not encountered in 30 years of campaigning. The Terrans counterattacked. Not in force, they didn't have the force. But 3 of his supply depots in the outer belt were struck simultaneously by small, fast teams that appeared from directions his sensor nets did not cover, hit hard, and disappeared before responses could be organized. 1 depot was destroyed entirely. 2 were damaged severely enough to require rerouting of his logistics chain. Then a Veth patrol flotilla near Jupiter's second moon encountered what appeared to be a derelict Terran frigate drifting on a slow trajectory. Standard protocol called for a boarding assessment. The boarding team found the ship completely empty, crew evacuated, systems minimal, but operational enough to be actively transmitting a precise targeting solution to 4 Terran vessels that materialized from behind the moon at optimal firing range. Sovrith lost the entire patrol flotilla in 11 minutes. He called Harith again. They used a dead ship as bait, Harith said. He did not sound confused anymore. He sounded thoughtful in a way that Sovrith found unsettling. Commander, I have been reviewing the historical files on this species. Before they achieved spaceflight. Their own history. And? They have been at war with each other, on and off, for most of their recorded existence. Thousands of years. They developed every doctrine we are now encountering: adaptive dispersal, redundant command structures, the use of apparent weakness as a tactical position, not against alien adversaries, but against each other. Harith paused. Every tactic we apply to them, some version of it has been applied to them before, by their own kind. They have been developing responses to these pressures for millennia. Sovrith sat back. They are not adapting to us, Harith continued, with the careful precision of a man stating something he wished were not true. We are encountering a species that has been pre-adapted. All of this, the redundancy, the refusal to centralize, the capacity to absorb losses and continue, this is not emergency improvisation. This is how they were already built. The silence in the cabin lasted a long time. What is colossal for this species? Sovrith asked. Harith met his eyes. I don't know that we have found it yet, Commander. In week 17 of the campaign, a Terran officer named Colonel Dai coordinated a strike that destroyed Sovrith's secondary fuel processing station. In week 18, a small vessel commanded by a pilot named Joe slipped through 3 layers of blockade to resupply the isolated Sector 7 ground forces. In week 19, a signals team led by a technician named New York restored communications between 4 isolated Terran units that had been operating blind for a month, and suddenly those 4 units began acting in coordination that his tactical models had not predicted and could not counter quickly enough to prevent. In week 20, Sovrith received a communication from the Veth High Council. They were concerned about the campaign's duration. He wrote his response carefully. He told them the truth, that the Terrans were at reduced capacity, that they had lost the majority of their infrastructure, that by any conventional measure the campaign should already have ended. He told them about colossal and what his best tactical officer had concluded. He told them that he was revising his estimate of how long this would take. Then he sent a secondary communication, marked personal and flagged for Harith's eyes only. It read, "Begin modeling withdrawal scenarios. Not for use. For readiness." Harith acknowledged within the hour. That night, alone in his command cabin with the tactical displays running their endless loops, Sovrith looked at the numbers again. Terran fleet strength, 19%. Terran infrastructure, severely degraded. Terran casualties, heavy by any measure. And in week 20, they had still managed 3 successful offensive strikes, 1 resupply run through a sealed blockade, and a communications restoration operation that his intelligence division had not detected until it was complete. He thought about the Terran colonel's answer to her subordinate. Until we don't have to anymore. He thought about what it meant for a species to hold that answer not as a statement of hope but as a simple operational fact, a description of how they were made, not merely how they felt in the moment. He turned off the displays. He did not sleep well. 3 weeks later, Sovrith formally requested a ceasefire dialogue. The Terran response came within 2 hours. It was professional, measured, and contained no trace of triumph. They named a time. They named a location. They confirmed which officers would attend. The officer they sent to the table was a general named Voss. He arrived on time. He brought a small staff, an aide named me, a communications officer named Hai, a logistics advisor named Wa. He was quiet, Voss. He did not gloat. He did not perform. He sat down across from Sovrith's delegation and looked at them with the even, patient expression of a man who had been doing a difficult thing for a long time and was now prepared to stop doing it, if terms could be reached that warranted stopping. Sovrith looked at him and understood, with the clarity that comes only from months of evidence accumulating into certainty, that the colossal he had been waiting for had never been coming. Not because the Terrans were invincible. They were not. They had bled enormously. But because somewhere in their long and brutal history of breaking and rebuilding themselves, they had quietly stopped knowing how to quit. He opened the first session. "We are prepared to discuss terms," he said. Voss nodded once. "So are we." And that was how it ended, not with a collapse, not with a final breaking, but with a ceasefire between a species that had run the numbers and a species that had never fully trusted the numbers to tell the whole story. View transition group. View transition old. View transition new. Animation duration, 0.25s. Animation timing function, cubic Bezier, 0.191, 0.221. Visualize show_widget.